Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you the next chapter in the tearful and challenging love story between James and LT Dipe, a journey that seemed to have ended, but in reality is only just beginning. While James continues his desperate, day-by-day search for Dipe, his heart is being torn apart by the mysterious disappearance of the woman he loves most. Meanwhile, Dipe, now living under the name Hoa, has completely lost all memory of her past. She is being cared for by a kind police officer named GC and is living a new life, completely unaware that somewhere across the city, there is a man thinking about her every second, aching for her return. And just when James feels he can no longer bear the pain, a horrifying event strikes. His young son, the precious child born from his love with Dipe, suddenly falls seriously ill and has to be rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The devastating news hits James like a fatal blow. He already lost Dipe, and now is he about to lose their child too? Will a miracle happen when all hope seems lost? Can James find Dipe again? And will Dipe, now living as Hoa, ever remember the life and love she once shared so deeply with him? Stay tuned for today's episode to discover this heart-wrenching turn of events. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any part of this emotional journey of two souls trying to find their way back to each other. While James was still wandering through the streets, carefully pasting up flyers with Dipe's face, the woman he loved, who had been missing for months, his phone suddenly vibrated in his pocket. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Mom calling. A bad feeling stabbed through his heart. He answered quickly. On the other end, his mother's voice trembled, choking through sobs. James, come to the hospital now. Your son, he has a high fever. It won't go down. He's unconscious. The doctors say it's critical. Her words struck like lightning on a clear day. James froze for a second. Then, without thinking, he dropped the stack of flyers still in his hands and dashed into the street to hail a ride. There was only one thought screaming in his head, my son, nothing can happen to my son. When he arrived at the hospital, he saw his mother standing in a daze outside the emergency room. Her face was pale, eyes swollen and red, hands clutching a small handkerchief as if it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. The door to the treatment room was closed. Inside was the little boy James had cradled through every bedtime. Every tiny first step, now lying unconscious in a hospital bed surrounded by 4 lines, breathing tubes and cold machines. James couldn't believe what he was seeing. Just yesterday, his son had beamed at him during a video call, and now he lay there silent like an angel lost in slumber. His skin was pale, his breathing faint. It crushed James's heart. He stood frozen for several seconds before falling into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Sobbing uncontrollably, his mother quietly placed a hand on his shoulder, silently sharing in his unbearable pain. Not long after, the doctor called James in for a consultation. James entered, trying to stay composed. But the expression on the doctor's face, the same doctor who had cared for his son through all their past visits, already told him everything he needed to know. The doctor began in a somber voice, I'm very sorry to inform you, your son is in critical condition. He has leukemia inherited from his mother. He's had transfusions before, but this time his red blood cell count has dropped severely. His body can no longer handle further treatment. James froze, his eyes wide, hands clenched into fists, voice shaking. No, isn't there anything else? Any other option you haven't tried? Please save my son. The doctor shook his head, eyes full of regret. We've tried everything. Every treatment plan has failed. His body can no longer respond. All we can do now is ease his pain. James sat in stunned silence. His throat tightened like 100 blades were slicing through his heart. Dipe was still missing. His son, his only child, was slipping away. His world was crumbling before his eyes. How was he supposed to accept an ending like this? How could a father who had fought, searched, and clung to every ounce of hope face the brutal reality that his son might not survive? The doctors advised the family to bring the boy home, so he could spend his final moments surrounded by love. There was nothing more the hospital could offer. Staying would only make the child's final hours colder, more isolated. James said nothing. He simply nodded silently. He understood, and he no longer had the strength to beg for miracles. His heart was being crushed, but his mind knew what had to be done. Take his son home, not let him die alone in a sterile, unfamiliar hospital room. That afternoon, the rain fell gently. James carried his son from the car into the house. The boy lay limp in his arms, so frail, so light, as if a single breeze could carry him away. He laid him on the small bed where they used to read fairy tales, play with toy cars, giggle together under the soft golden nightlight. Everything was still the same, except the laughter was gone. James sat by the edge of the bed, holding his son's icy hand, whispering like a lullaby, "Daddy brought you home. You're not alone, son. I'm right here. And your mom, she'll come back soon too." The words had barely left his lips when tears fell onto his son's hand, hot, desperate tears that held all the sorrow James had been suppressing for so long. In the corner of the room, James's mother stood silently, clutching her chest, choking on sobs. Her face was carved with pain, every wrinkle trembling with each breathless cry. She stepped forward, gently sat beside the bed, stroked her grandson's hair, and let her tears fall. "My poor boy, my precious grandchild, you never got to grow up, never got to call your mother one last time. And now this." No one said another word. The room sank into silence, a silence so heavy it felt impossible to breathe. James and his mother just sat there, holding each other beside a child whose life was fading like a candle in the wind. They wept, not with loud cries, not with rage, but the kind of crying that gets caught in the chest, burning in the throaty pain too deep for sound. It was cruel. Why did all the suffering have to fall on James now? Why would God let a man who had already lost his wife, who hadn't even found the love of his life, now face the loss of the child he loved more than life itself? James stared up at the ceiling, tears slipping into his ears. "If there must be a price, then take my life. Just let my son live. I'll trade everything, my entire existence. Just don't take him away from me." Even though the doctors had prescribed pain medication, hoping to ease the boy's agony, his frail body was simply too exhausted to fight anymore. The pain still racked him in waves, causing him to convulse, cold sweat soaking his tiny frame, his breathing labored and broken. James sat right beside him, not taking his eyes off his son for even a second. He held the boy's hand tightly, trying to pass on what little warmth he had left behind him. His mother sat with trembling hands, gently stroking the thin, soft hair of the grandson she had cared for since birth. Suddenly, that fragile breath stopped. James looked at the monitor, then turned to his son's face. There was no more moaning, no more breathing. His eyes closed peacefully. His pale lips moved slightly, as if trying to say something, but it was too late. The boy had taken his final breath in James's arms. In that moment, time froze. No sound, no movement, only a father quietly holding the lifeless body of his child. And breaking down, James collapsed to the floor, clutching the small, still frame to his chest, sobbing like a child. "I'm sorry, my son. I couldn't protect you. Your mom isn't back yet. I'm sorry." He cried until his throat burned. No more tears left to shed. But the pain kept surging through his chest, threatening to burn away everything that still remained. There is no pain greater than this, no goodbye more cruel than this. He held his son tighter, whispering between gasps that tore from his soul, "If I could, I would go with you. I can't take this. I don't want to live without you." And then James blacked out. His body collapsed beside his son, his hand still clutching the little hand that had already gone cold. His mother panicked, screaming for help. Her cries tore through the haunting silence like a blade. The next morning, James woke up in a small resting room, his eyes opening to a hollow emptiness. The room was quiet. On the table lay a mourning sash and a small photo frame of his son, his innocent smile now just a memory. James no longer cried. He stared blankly at the ceiling, unmoving like stone, but in his eyes there was nothing left, only the ruins of a man, completely broken. So, it's really over. My son is gone. Our bond ends here. He slowly sat up, not because the pain had passed, but because he knew his son was gone. And now the living must take care of the one who had departed. James gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay conscious to carry out the last thing he could do for the child he loved more than anything. James's mother, who had been there from the very first cry of her grandson, couldn't bear it. She fainted over and over. Each time she woke, she would cry and call his name in desperation. My baby, why did heaven take you from me? You were just a child. You didn't even get a chance to grow up. She was so weak she could no longer stand, couldn't even take a step. James's heart ached for her. He couldn't let her witness any more of this sorrow. He gently carried her to the resting room, tucked her in with a blanket, then quietly closed the door. Please rest, Mom. I'll take care of the rest. I won't let you fall apart too. He called Trang Dipe's close friend, the one who had stood by the family since Dipe disappeared. Trang, my mom is exhausted. I need you to come help take care of her. I can't handle all of this on my own anymore. On the other end, Trang choked up. She had never heard James sound so broken, so hoarse, so fragile. The funeral was simple but solemn, held at home. Suddenly, the small house was filled with people, but strangely, among the crowd, James felt more alone than ever. He had no more tears to cry, no strength left to speak. All he could do was stand silently before his son's photo, bow his head, and whisper thanks through clenched sorrow. His close friends, those who had stood by him through work and life's trials, were there. They came to his side, gripping his hand tightly, trying to offer him what little strength they could. James was drowning in grief. There were moments he just wanted to die to follow his son, to escape this world consumed by loss. But every time he thought of Dipe, still missing somewhere out there, and his aging mother, frail and broken by the unbearable shock, he forced himself to hold on to the thinnest thread of purpose, not because he was strong, but because he knew he couldn't fall now. There were still people waiting for him, and one promise still left unfulfilled. After laying his son to rest, James was like a man who had lost his soul. The pain was too immense to fade easily, but he didn't allow himself to collapse because deep down, he knew he couldn't lose Dipe to the woman he had loved with all his heart. James resumed his search. Like a lone soul swimming through an endless ocean, he pressed on. Whether under the scorching sun or through heavy rain, whether by day or night, he walked every street, every unfamiliar village, asking the same question, have you seen this woman? In his heart, hope flickered like a candle in the wind, but as long as it still burned, however faintly, he would not stop. Whenever he missed Dipe and his son too much, James couldn't go home to cry, because he knew that if he fell apart, his mother, already shattered by the loss of her grandson, wouldn't be able to stay standing either. So he chose silence. He quietly returned to the small house where Dipe once lived, the place that held the memories of their first happiest days together. The house was now covered in dust. Moss had crept across the cracked walls. Weeds choked the path to the door without Dipe's warmth. It was nothing but a worn-out shell of love long lost. James stood on the porch, sorrow brimming in his eyes. Every corner of the house stirred a memory, from the cupboard where Dipe once plated their evening meals, to the wooden bed where she sat reading by the window. Dipe, where are you? Our child is gone. How much longer will you make me wait? Numb with grief, James began to clean the house. Every stain, every layer of dust he wiped with his calloused hands. With silent tears falling onto the worn floor, he didn't know if Dipe would ever return. But if one day she stood before this door again, he wanted the house not to feel like a ruin of sorrow, If you come back, you'll see this place has always been waiting for you, just like I still am." That night, James sat silently on the porch. A dim yellow light cast shadows across his weary face. Eyes hollow from sleepless nights and dried up tears. The house was cleaner now but still cold and lifeless because the one he needed most had not returned. Suddenly, a figure approached. It was Tung, his closest friend, the one who had stood by him through all the hardest days. Tung stood quietly for a while, then gently placed a hand on James's shoulder, speaking in a deep, steady voice. "I know, James, I know the pain makes you want to give up, but you've come this far. You were strong enough to let your son go. You have to keep going, for Dipe, and for yourself." James didn't speak, he just let the tears fall again, quiet, not violent, soaking through his shirt. Tung sat beside him, eyes gazing into the distance. "I believe Dipe is still out there, alive. Maybe she's looking for you too, just lost, unable to find her way back. Don't give up, I'll be with you. Every step of the way, we'll find her, your family will be whole again. I truly believe that." James clenched his fists and nodded. For the first time in what felt like forever. A faint light flickered in his eyes. In a faraway place, completely cut off from James's world, Dipe, or rather Hoa. The name she had been given, was living a different life, a life without memories, without identity. The day she was found, it was pouring rain. Officer GC, while in the midst of pursuing a criminal, happened to spot her lying motionless by the roadside, battered, soaked in blood, her clothes drenched and torn. She was rushed to the hospital just in time, narrowly escaping death. But when she woke up, Dipe remembered nothing. No name, no past, no family. Only a pair of hollow eyes and a vague, haunting fear that lingered deep within her mind. Officer GC, though typically stern and reserved, found himself unable to walk away when he looked into her eyes that held both strength and fragility. He took her in, gave her the name Hoa, simple, pure, like a new beginning in those first days. She barely spoke. She would sit silently by the window, staring into the distance as if searching for something buried in her subconscious. Sometimes, in her sleep, she would jolt awake in tears, her pillow soaked, without knowing why she was crying. Now and then, she heard a warm voice echo. In her dreams, "Dipe, don't leave me." And faintly, the laughter of a child would drift through the air. But whenever she tried to remember, her head would throb in agony, and everything would blur into a foggy, unreachable haze. GC didn't treat her like a stranger, but like someone he owed something deep and unspoken. He never pried, never pressured her to recall anything. He simply said, "Just live peacefully. When your memories return, I believe you'll know what to do." And so Hoa, once known as Dipe, continued to live her quiet days. She tended the garden, cooked meals, helped the local villagers. She lived gently, as though she had never suffered loss. Hey everyone, if your heart aches for the loss that James is enduring, please leave a comment below, a prayer, a blessing, a few words to give him strength as he walks through these darkest days. Let's hold on to hope together that one day, not too far from now, James and Dipe will find their way back to each other, and their little family will be reunited in love. Leave a message for James below so he knows he's not alone, and if you believe in miracles, stay with us, the next chapter is coming.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người ơi, thì hiện tại mình đã vừa hoàn thành xong video về câu chuyện Quả Lý Tử Diệp phần tiếp theo. Thì mọi người cũng đã xem là trong tập vừa rồi thì James trải qua một cái cao trào cảm xúc rất là tệ. Tại vì dường như là anh đã đánh mất tất cả mọi thứ, từ tình yêu đến gia đình. Và hiện tại bây giờ anh chỉ còn có mẹ bên cạnh và một niềm hy vọng duy nhất là anh có thể tìm lại Diệp. Tuy nhiên James chưa bao giờ từ bỏ, và với nghị lực và sự cố gắng thì mình tin rằng chắc chắn anh sẽ tìm lại được Diệp và tình yêu của họ có thể gắn kết lại với nhau. Nhưng chắc là James phải trải qua rất là nhiều khó khăn, và liệu James có thể kiên trì đến khi gặp lại Diệp và liệu tình yêu của họ có thể chiến thắng thử thách hiện tại hay không, Thì mọi người ơi, nếu như yêu quý James và Diệp cũng như là ủng hộ tinh thần cho James thì mọi người có thể để lại bình luận, tạo động lực ở phần bình luận để cho James có thể có động lực hơn để vượt qua khó khăn hiện tại mọi người nhé.